Hey everybody, I work at USA Today and specifically on the sports team. So my little department is, as you can see, USA Today Sports Media Group. That's our full name. So I'm going to kind of give you guys a general overview of what my team does and how we utilize WordPress to make our lives easier, and then we'll dive into some more details on how we speed up our sites, and mostly on how you guys can build on top of what we've done. So let's just dive right into it. Okay, so like I said, I work at USA Today Sports Media Group. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with the USA Today national site. This does not run on WordPress specifically. Our team, we own a lot of other sites that are owned by USA Today. These are the sites in the middle there. For the Win is one of our most popular sites. The Big Lead, MMA Junkie. So what we do is we build templates for each site that we bring in, and then whenever we can reuse our code base, obviously we go for that, right? And then obviously we work with all different kinds of sports, as you can see on the right side. Just to give you a little perspective, USA Today brings in about 118 million monthly uniques. USA Today Sports Media Group specifically brings in 63 million uniques across all of our sites. That's just to give you a little bit of perspective again. Again, to clarify that more, these are our cross-platform reach users, and this essentially means that if you're on your mobile device and you go visit the site, and you're on your desktop and you go visit the site, essentially that should count as one unique user, right? So this is something that's kind of interesting. I did not really know about this that much when I first started with USA Today Sports Media Group. It's kind of cool for sports that we're so high up there, right? I mean, and we've been jumping. We used to be down on the lower end of the spectrum, so we're kind of, obviously we're shooting to get up there and compete with ESPN one day, right? So to give you a little timeline about how we started off, our group started actually kind of recently, only a couple of years ago. When we first started off, we knew that we wanted to use WordPress, so that top line is essentially how we started off. We knew we wanted to go with WordPress. We hosted everything on Amazon ourselves, and then we had site-specific themes. So that means we had a new code base for every site we built, right? So as we're bringing in more sites, making more sites, it can get pretty daunting to maintain. Let's say I have 10 sites. That's 10 code bases I have to maintain separately, 10 separate updates, right? So over time we realized we wanted to move to WordPress.com VIP. And this is essentially a way of us not having to deal with keeping things updated. They take care of a lot of speed optimizations automatically. And then we built our own theme that we could use across all of our sites. So now all of a sudden we don't have to be worried about staying up late on the weekends. When our site goes down, WordPress.com VIP detects this and will bring our site back up, or even if it's something they can handle, right? And to further take that even further, we've recently rebranded our sites to have a theme that we can use across all the different sites. So before it was just we had a code base that they all shared, but once we started unifying the front end, the look of each site is very similar. Now we don't even have to once we test something one time, we can launch it to all of our sites, affecting 63 million users, right? So to give you a little bit of perspective of WordPress.com VIP, I'm not sure how many of you have done stuff manually with Amazon, but it can be a little daunting if you're not, don't consider yourself a guru with that tech stuff, you know? So WordPress.com VIP is definitely an enterprise solution. It can be very expensive. There's other hosting companies that specifically deal with highly scalable WordPress sites, and they also take care of things like if your site goes down, they'll take a basic look at it. A lot of different services like that. Come talk to me after if you're looking for a new fit for yourself. So here's some of the tools that we use that help us out. We use, I won't dive into this too much. What I really want to show you is kind of some of our sites, right? So here's our most popular site, For the Win. You know, the latest sports news, very, very popular. And here's the big lead, right? Now, they both have a slightly different audiences that they cater to, but you can notice already that the theme itself is very similar between the two. Now, this really helps us out a lot because essentially if we, for instance, a great example, we could come up with a speed optimization for our site, right? When we launch it, because we're using the same kind of layout, it's less testing for us, you know? Right at this point, we have over 60 sites on this platform. Yeah. So it's crucial for us to make sure that we're not going too far from what our core product is. A couple more examples. MMA Junkie, Hoops Hype. This is an example of a site that was running on one of our older themes, right? You can tell that the look is very different. So again, we might have to do some extra testing whenever we're launching on a site like Hoops Hype, right? Another great example is we've launched site-specific, we've launched sites specifically for each NFL team. So because we've mastered our core product and we've launched a lot of sites with it, we know that we can easily replicate it. We can write scripts and things like that that automatically build our new sites and update it with basic color changes or anything like that. So once we find something that works, we can easily say new site, new site, new site, new site, and all we need, the only challenging piece there is obviously generating that content, right? Golf Week is another site that we work with, and we also have some sites that launch at very specific times. The one that I will point out here is Ad Meter. So essentially during the Super Bowl, you can vote on your favorite commercial, right? And this just, the traffic, it spikes at right at halftime and all the way till the end of the third quarter. So having WordPress.com VIP there to help us scale, and also making sure that we have all of our speed optimizations up to date is very important. Obviously, we use things like the customizer. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with that. You know, update your logos, and then past that, we have on and off switches for most of the features that we have across our sites. And this is something that, I mean, you can kind of think of this as plugins, right? You have your plugins page and you have a big list, you know, here's all the things that I activated or not activated. And the key thing here, you know, we've written a lot, but that doesn't mean we're going to turn on all of these options. We don't want to have these things loading all the time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, one of the first things you'll hear about speeding up your site is don't install too many plugins. And I mean, in general, I think that's great advice. But it's not about the number of plugins, in my personal opinion. It's about all it takes is one bad plugin, right? I mean, and if you don't need something loaded, why are you going to load it, right? That's the problem with loading too many plugins. That plugin, you could turn it on, but it might not do anything unless you configure another setting, you know? So it all really depends, right? But that's kind of our core philosophy, right? Obviously, you know, we have options past that. So that's kind of a little overview of what we do at USA Today. Now I'm going to talk about specifically about speeding up your site. So WordPress.com VIP and WordPress.com, in case you guys weren't aware, it's actually just one big multi-site. So yes, it is a large multi-site, and just I won't dive into the multi-site talk too much, but a multi-site essentially lets you run several WordPress sites on one code base, and allows you to load everything, have everything in one database. It can be really, really powerful, but you do have to know what you're doing, and I think for me to simplify that, I would say if you're launching a lot of different sites and they're all very specific and they're very unique, multi-site is probably not the best option. Whereas for us, we've over time have unified our code base across all of our sites. So multi-site is definitely a big plus for us. But what I want to do is give you guys some takeaways and some things that you can do today. So the tool of the day is webpagetest.org. How many people have heard of this tool before? Raise your hand. Oh, really? That's not as many as I thought. This is probably, oh, yeah, I got a couple more in the back. Honestly, this is probably one of the best tools to understand what's slowing down your site. If you're kind of confused, you don't know why is my site running slowly? People just, I'm frustrated. It's my host. It's this. It's that. Just pull up on this, and I'm pretty sure you'll find some things that stick out to you.
So do you like it more than Google's page speed tester?
So on one of the last slides, I actually mentioned I bring that one up.
Oh, yeah.
So there's another tool out there called Google Page Speed Insights. Notice how on web page test, it's going to give you a little waterfall, right? When you visit this site, the first thing that happens is that we go to WordPress.org and we do a DNS lookup and then initial connection, and we're walking you through every step. And notice, for instance, you can see like this is going to cause an issue, right? Or there might be an issue there. Sometimes you have to do some investigation, right? Google Page Speed Insights gives you a list of things that you could be doing. It'll give you a little score, like you did 88, you got a B, 88%, right? So definitely suggest doing that too. But I don't have my notes here, but that's fine. The facts are that speed is a ranking factor in Google, and it's going to continue to be more and more of a factor. And especially if you're not optimized for mobile. The one thing that we do in particular at USA Today, we'll do different things on mobile and desktop, and I feel like I used to frown upon that a little bit, just because you want the same experience on desktop and mobile, right? But if your experience on mobile is extremely slow, you make some choices, or either you speed it up or you take it out, and sometimes you don't have the time to make it as efficient as you want, right? So it's your website's page load time is just going to become more and more important over time. Best practices. Honestly, I'm glad you brought up that tool with Google Page Speed Insights. That's actually the best way to get those best practices. Things like putting your JavaScript in the footer, combining your JavaScript and CSS. I mean, you can do a basic Google search and find a lot of these things, right? So if you want to see those big red flags, I would look at Google Page Speed Insights. But really what it comes down to is this 80-20 rule, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this too, but look at what is causing 80% of your issues, or 20%, sorry, let me rephrase that. 20% of the effort that you put into something will solve 80% of your results. For instance, if you go to Google, that Google Insights, the PageSpeed Insights, and you take care of those two big red issues, not the yellow issues. I know the yellow ones are, it might be easy or fun or whatever. You get distracted, right? But you want to take care of the most important things that make the biggest difference. Going from 2-second page load time to 1 second by just changing a few just that one thing is awesome. But that next step, going 0.1, or 0.001 faster, it's not going to make that big of a difference, right? So focus on the most important things. What you should shoot for. Honestly, my standard personally is around 2 seconds, and you're going to go to a site, those testing tools like web page speed test, right? And it might say 5 seconds or 10 seconds, but what I also would like you to keep an eye out for is the perceived load time. And I know a lot of people will come back to me and say like, oh, technically it takes 20 seconds to load, right? And that might be the case, but if you're doing it in a smart way, you could be running things while the user is not loading any other assets. So you say, after you've loaded all this other stuff, then you can do these menial tasks. So to the user, the site seems to be loading very quickly, but you could be processing things for 20 seconds, right? So again, that perceived time is very important. So let's get to the bread and butter, right? The 8 easy wins, the things you can do today. The first one is turn on HTTP compression. This is pretty across the board. I would say this is pretty standard and is almost always turned on. A very simple way to check, go to gzipwtf.com and type in your site's URL and it'll say yay or nay, right? There's a couple ways of turning this on. It's generally a server configuration. HTML5 boilerplate has a really nice way to do this if you're managing your site yourself, or if you are kind of on a managed hosting, or most hosting companies, if you reach out to them and say, hey, why isn't gzip turned on? They're going to probably say, oh, I'm so sorry, and just turn it on for you, right? So it's pretty standard across the board. So if your hosting is not doing this automatically, I would definitely consider switching to somebody else. Personal preference. Caching. This is really probably one of the most important by far. I mean, gzip is just the easiest win, right? But turning caching on is night and day for your site, right? I'm sure you see a lot of plugins for this, W3C Total Cache, WP Super Cache. There's a lot of plugins that do a lot of this for you automatically. At USA Today Sports Media Group, we will look at specific, we will cache things ourselves. So if you're a developer, you could use this awesome function called WP Set Cache. And you could
set SET.
Yeah, set cache, and you can store things like, let's say this, you might take a while to process this information, right? So you can store it in the database, so you do not have to process this again, right? And then also browser caching. Browser caching is essentially, here's a CSS file, or here's a JavaScript file, and then I download that, right? I go to the web page again, and then my browser says, oh, I've seen that before. So I already have that locally, so why am I going to download that from the server again, right? So this creates, obviously your website's going to load a lot faster, leveraging both of these. You might need to learn a little bit about versioning your files. For instance, so if I make a change to my CSS file, right, the browser is going to say, oh, well, I already have that downloaded, right? WordPress has this built in, So, you know, it's as simple as adding a version number each time you make a change to your CSS file, right? Now, WP Query is a function that's used on almost every homepage of every WordPress theme. The most basic one is grab the 10 latest posts, right? But over time, as you maybe want to do some more complex things, more complex queries. I can give you a perfect example of the most complex query I've ever done is, or at least heavy, is I had a multi-site with several hundred sites on it, and I needed to query all the sites and get the 10 latest posts throughout the whole network, right? Imagine if I just ran WP Query by itself on the home page. That would have taken easily an extra few seconds every single time a user visits that page. So by using WP set cache or transients is another one, I essentially could save several seconds of load time for my site. This one, in my opinion, is another easy win. Minifying your images. The advanced version of this is using sprites, but let's talk about just the basic minifying images, right? You could there's a bunch of applications that you can download to your machine locally. Image Optim, PNG, Gauntlet, you just drag and drop your images in there and it minifies them, right? A great example of this is, a lot of people have these really fancy background images for their websites, right? I've seen people drag and drop it into Image Optim, and it's been reduced by 80%. And you go to that waterfall layout, and you can easily see that one background image was over 50% of that website's page load. Sometimes just the tiniest little thing makes a big difference.
Does it matter how you use your images? In other words, if I put them in the background or whether I'm just bringing them in HTML, it doesn't matter.
So an image is just a resource, right?
Right.
So what matters is the size of that image. And there's a couple other things that people consider best practice, like what is the max width that my image should be, right? Usually around 1,000 pixels is a safe bet. I've seen some people go up to 1,400 if they really feel like they need it to be extra detailed. There's also in Photoshop specifically, when you export for web, it will even tell you like what percent. Like when you export for web, it'll say what do you want to export, or at what quality do you want to export this at? 50%, 60%, 80%. And but things like the background image, you might want to test that out a little bit, because sometimes just I've seen it where jumping from 70% to 60% also brings down that file size by another 20, 30%.
Do you know if SVG is fast or not?
So SVGs are not. I want to say that they're not images. Essentially, they're shapes.
Right.
So because it's just a shape, you can expand it infinitely, and it will look the same at
But it
almost.
has nothing to do with speed, though.
It does have to do with speed. It is faster in most cases. I would say a perfect example of that is social media icons, right? So you have this Facebook logo, and you might want it to be small here, but on this other page, you might want it to be larger. So all you have to, instead of downloading a full image, you're just storing essentially the coordinates of
So it's good for icons.
Yeah, it's great for icons, and some people build their own SVGs. And another thing that a lot of people do is they'll use fonts like Font Awesome, and that has a lot of. It's not an SVG, but it's actually loading a font, so you can load those social icons at any size.
So Font Awesome is fast too.
It's fast, but I think SVGs are that's the new and better thing, yeah. Yes, question.
The SVG is not for images, just shapes?
Just shapes. The way I wouldn't bother yourself with that, because usually once your site's built, it's already built, right? So to go back and to change a lot of resources to SVGs is probably going to be pretty intensive. It's usually one of those decisions you make at the beginning of the project. The reason why I bring up image compression is because what can you all do right now? You can go home and go download the images from your server, drag them home to Image Optim, and then put them back on your server, and then all your images have been compressed. There's other plugins that do this for you. I know Smush It is kind of, I feel like everybody used to have that, but that would automatically compress your images whenever you uploaded them to WordPress. I think it is a premium plugin now, but I'm sure there's other
I think it's still free.
It's still free?
They just,
Are
for
there-
a time, they made you register for whoever took over that project.
Okay,
But I think if you already had it, I think it's still free.
so Smush It is
But if
free.
you didn't have it, you have to pay now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I tried.
Oh, okay. See, I've been back and forth on
50 bucks a month and you get their, it's WPMV or dev.
And then you get
something.
access to 50 free plugins after
Yeah.
you pay something.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no.
No, I
So
don't.
can you can you optimize them if you bring, let's say, there's two ways to have the images. One, you're putting them on the server. And the other one is you're actually bringing it in through the WordPress, putting it in a
So you're
post or something
uploading,
like that.
so two ways of doing it. Either you're doing it yourself and on your own end, or you're uploading it into the media,
Right, that's
WordPress
right.
media
And so I
area.
can optimize it even if I'm bringing it into media.
Yeah, now, if you want to be extra safe about it, you could drag things into Image Optim locally yourself. The way that I would look at this though is, let's say that you know for a fact that this page is having an issue, right? This page is running slowly, and you see that there's a background image on there, or some image that, for some reason, somebody uploaded an image to your site that was 4,000 pixels wide, and first of all, you should probably bring that down to 1,000 pixels wide, maybe drag an image off them, and then put it back up on your site, and then everything's, that background image that was loading on every single page of your site is now fixed. So your main bottleneck could be solved with something this simple.
Sorry, one quick question related to images.
Yes.
For sports, it's going to be a lot of images, obviously.
Yes.
Is there any type of what do you guys do as far as the quality of the images keeps going up because of the quality of the screens?
Okay, good question. That actually reminds me of something. So the question is, what do we do at USA Today? Obviously, with images, obviously we have, we're very image heavy, right? So another tool that I would actually highly suggest, it comes with WordPress's Jetpack plugin, one of the most popular plugins on the WordPress repository right now. They have one of the plugins is called, I should be remembering the name of it. It's a CDN for images. Photon, that's right. So it's called, it's Photon.
Max CDN is better though.
Hmm?
Max CDN is better though.
Okay.
$20 a month.
Yeah. Essentially what it does is it will reserve it will put in an argument with your images, and it will say what the width and height is, and then when it grabs the image from the server, it will only send it to you with that particular size. So if you're on a mobile device, why are you going to download an image that is 1,000 pixels wide? You could download one that is 400 pixels wide. In addition to that, it is a CDN, and then you get in the whole then you get into the whole CDN argument. That's a separate slide, so we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Okay? Any questions about images before we move on? Yeah.
I just looked it up, and WP Smush It is free. There is a pro version that's better, but I use it and it really does work. And I optimize my images in Photoshop, and it still totally works.
Awesome.
It's kind of amazing.
Okay, so WP Smush It, there's a free version. So yeah, get that on your sites, and every image that you upload to WordPress is optimized. I think there's a bulk optimization thing too. So sometimes I've seen people optimize all their old images. They have thousands and thousands of images on their site. They let that run overnight. All of a sudden, the images across their whole site have been minified. Yes, another question.
Oh, well, I was going to say, if the old images, some of the ones that are over a certain size, it can't process them.
Oh, right.
On,
But it's like
whatever.
really crazy
Yeah.
large, like you'd be a little insane to have images on your site that
Sure.
large. I think
But
it
the
was
problem
like,
is like WordPress keeps changing over the years, and what was good before is now, something that's out of favor, so, yeah, like some people have old, like big images in place.
A final note about images, or what is it? I've talked to a lot of people about this. There's really two things that tend to be the bottleneck of, honestly, the web and page loads. And I'll tell you, one of those two things is images. That's why we're talking about all these different tools. That's why you have these things locally on the server. That's why you have things like sprites, which we're going to pass over today. The other one is fonts. So keep an eye out on fonts too. If you're just loading all the fonts in the world, that's going to probably be a bottleneck for your site load time.
One more quick thing.
Yes.
So I'm just curious about screens. I don't know too much about this, but how do you future-proof your images? So for example, Apple made a big deal about, the Retina displays and everything is so high resolution. How do you know that in the future, Google's going to say, you have low quality images, they're not scalable or something like that. So what do you guys do as far as a general thing? You say you size it 1,000 pixels wide, you say?
So the way to future-proof your images, in my opinion, is to put them in WordPress. Because if you
can
put it in
regenerate
WordPress,
it at some point in the future too.
so let's say you put an image in WordPress that's 2,000 pixels wide, or let's just say 1,000, right? The perfect size, right? On mobile, you don't need to load that size. So I would have a plugin like Photon take care of that resizing issue, and then let's say Apple comes out with a standard for the Retina screens. I could always install a plugin that extends that or says, hey, now I want you to add this code on this edge case. And maybe in our case at USA Today, we might write that ourselves, right? So there's a lot of different ways of solving the same problem, but by having all your images on WordPress in the first place, you can do things like run a bulk image optimization across your whole site and solve all the problems with most of your images right away. So,
Do you spell the plugin, the blog,
for
the mobile resizing?
Photon, Photon, right? Sounds about right.
Thank you.
It's through the Jetpack WordPress plugin. So you need to install that first. Yes, question?
I think last year that feature also became part of the regular WordPress interface. So that source set thing that feeds the image in different sizes to different devices is just part of regular WordPress now.
Yeah, we've done work on our end to make sure that was compatible with our stuff too. So I haven't looked into what is core to WordPress, but again, easily extendable, and most importantly, it can be updated at whenever, through a plugin or through your own code or through WordPress core, whenever it's been standardized. So yeah, just by having it on WordPress, if there's ever a core update that makes everything faster, then you're going to get those advantages. Yeah. So the next big win is combining your CSS and JavaScript. This is a little bit more developer heavy, but for us at USA Today, we actually have WordPress.com VIP. What they do is they automatically take all of our JavaScript and all of our CSS and combine them for us. And they make sure that there's no conflicts, or sometimes it might need to be split up into a couple different JS files for various reasons that I won't get into. So definitely a big win. The way I would look at this is if you go to web page test and run that test, right, and you see a ton of CSS files being loaded, then that might be an indication that you should combine some of your CSS or combine some of your JavaScript files, right?
So you're saying you should have one big JavaScript, one big CSS file, and that's it? One big JS file, and that's it?
Ideally, in a perfect world, but the way I like to structure most of my sites is to have a couple of them. The key is to not
Fewer
have...
better.
Yeah, well, the key is not to have 50 of them. You don't want 20 of them. I think 5 is a great number, honestly, and with these new technologies coming out, this is not as big of a deal as it used to be, which I'll get into that in a second. So now we get back to the CDN, right? Yes, question about...
But before you said to use W3C cache, doesn't that program do that for you automatically?
Okay. So there are plugins with WordPress. W3C Total Cache is a great example. They can combine your CSS and JavaScript for you. Personal opinion, I usually don't like to use that because they try to come up with a very general way of solving it for all sites. There was one time where I did this and I just clicked like W3C Total Cache and I downloaded that and I just like clicked on everything, right? That's pretty much a guarantee that something's going to print.
Oh yeah.
So and combining your CSS and JavaScript is another perfect example of kind of signing yourself up to have some issues down the road, right? Usually with W3C Total Cache, what I like to do is just turn on basic page caching, right? Which basically just takes your whole page and saves that, like the output, so that way there's no processing going on. Sometimes something as simple as basic page caching is all you really need. Yes, question?
No, just something to add to that.
Oh, yes.
Plugins will also create different style sheets depending on what they do. For example, if you have like a revolution slider, I love it a lot, but it creates several other JavaScripts and it creates several style sheets depending on what you're adding and what you're styling on the actual slides. So plugins will also factor into what's being loaded by any given page and how you combine those together. If you change something in the slides, it didn't update the one that you had combined together for all that CSS code, you just broke your site.
So just to repeat for the live stream, keep an eye out for the plugins that you install that can quite often add a lot of JavaScript or CSS files that you weren't planning on loading in the first place. And this is why I mentioned before, it's not about the amount of plugins that you have on your site, it's about what they do. You can have one super plugin that injects 1,000 CSS files and your whole site is going to run super slow, right? So again, what can help you see what plugins are causing issues on your site or making your site run slowly, even though it has a lot of features, is going to web page test. So the next win is using a CDN. Stands for Content Distribution Network. And essentially what this does is I have my websites running on in New York, right? But let's say I'm connecting to my site while I'm in India. I have to travel across the world to get to that asset, right? So what a CDN will do is distribute your content, your static assets, images is a great example, across the globe. And that way, wherever you are in the world, it's going to connect to the server that's fastest for you. This is in my personal opinion, I don't think this is critical, at least for my personal site, right? But when it comes to USA Today, obviously we have global traffic. This is a bigger issue for us, or very important for us. So we rely on WordPress.com, VIP. We rely on their CDN solution. And then also there's a plug for Mac CDN earlier, and they are also very, very good. And Jack, you were saying you did use Cloudflare, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Cloudflare, I've heard a lot of good things.
Really easy.
Ooh, Cloudflare is free.
I set it up on
Yeah.
with my
Really good.
iPad
Yeah,
in about an hour.
nice.
You just need access to um, your DNS provider, so where you get
Okay.
your domain from.
So you just need access to your DNS provider and you can get CDN for free, which is pretty cool. And we're gonna see the results of his webpage test here in a second to see how fast that makes it, huh?
You should rerun it.
Oh, okay. This is another huge win. I mean, it is a developer-focused thing, but quite often you could ask your hosting provider and they might say, oh, well, there's a new service that does this, or they might just be able to upgrade you. It really depends on your provider, right? But upgrading to PHP 7, I mean, PHP has been a complaint as far as WordPress goes. It was kind of lagging behind in the speed optimization realm, and PHP 7 really took it to a new level. I mean, just by switching to PHP 7, your site could go way faster, right? And that's just a couple server configuration changes. Really, I won't dive into this much more other than, make sure that your site is compatible with PHP 7. There's tools, free plugins that will just scan your whole site and your code base and make sure that, that should be fine. With us at USA Today, we upgraded to PHP 7, and or VIP did, and we're a little bit faster, right? On top of it, so that was my big one before, but this one's probably, honestly, one of the even better than that. Upgrading to HTTPS, and that essentially allows you to turn on HTTP2. Now, HTTPS is essentially that a secure, installing an SSL on your site. If you go to my personal site, right, I'm at davidparsons.me. So for the longest time, I was at HTTP, davidparsons.me, right? But now, if you see that S there, or now, Google actually shows like a green lock, and pretty soon here, they're actually going to start showing more indications of like your site is insecure if you're not on HTTPS. So this has just recently become standard. SSL certificates, in case you're not aware, make your site a lot more secure by essentially whenever I send information across the web, it encrypts whatever I'm sending over, and make sure that nobody, if anybody intercepts that they won't be able to read that data, right? So a lot more secure. Critical when you're doing e-commerce. Now, Let's Encrypt, this amazing tool, this used to cost money, right? Let'sEncrypt.com is handing out SSL certificates for free. It's kind of awesome, and now nobody has an excuse anymore to not have an SSL on their site, right? Now, to talk about HTTP2 a little bit more, the way HTTP works is I kind of always like this. I always kind of like to describe it like this, just to kind of keep it simple. So the way HTTP works is, let's just say I have a cookie jar, right? And I go to that cookie jar, and the web's kind of interesting. They have they can grab 4 assets at a time, right? Or sometimes 8. So they can grab 8 resources, and then load those things, and then grab 8 more things. 8 more cookies, right? The issue is that because of that limitation, we essentially have to do hacky things to make our sites fast. We have to combine our JavaScript and CSS. We have to minify things, and there's essentially the way that we've optimized our sites for years is actually kind of through hacks, right? What having HTTPS and HTTP2 installed does, it allows you to load almost as many resources as you want. I'm not really sure of the bottlenecks, but many resources at the same time. So even though you should still combine your CSS and JavaScript, and that could be a big bottleneck on your site, it'll be pretty obvious if you look at that waterfall, right? But this is kind of on another level. So this is kind of what we were really shooting for the whole time with HTTP. So again, one of the biggest wins, and I highly suggest it. Yes, I got a question.
This looks like a great checklist of things to do. Is this already in your website by chance?
It is. My personal website, HTTP2 and HTTPS.
And the whole list you've been going through?
Oh yeah, definitely. Except the CDN. That's just, I just don't feel like I need that for my personal site. But with USA Today, obviously, we're moving forward with that. This is actually one of the few things we do not do with Sports Media Group at the moment. The reason why is because of ads. And I'm sure, anybody who's been in the publishing sphere has these frustrations where my ad provider will only send me this really weird file, or they will only give me content over HTTP. And for some reason, it's extremely complicated for them to serve it over to me securely. So, yes.
I wasn't clear on what I'm asking.
Okay.
I'm not surprised that you're wisely using your own techniques in
Yeah.
your own site, and that's great. I mean, in your personal website, you have an article that explains what you're all trying to explain to us.
I do not have one on my personal site, but I know I have a lot of resources on setting this up specifically. I have articles that I can link out to, obviously. Yeah.
Could you give us this presentation?
Huh?
Could you?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Great.
We could install one together, you know. But again, there's hosting. I think a lot of the hosting providers out there are doing this for you now. SiteGround, for instance, one of my favorites. They just have a little button like install, you know, and they do it through Let's Encrypt, you know. So so quite often your hosting provider can take care of this for you. That's why it depends, you know. Yes, question.
Unfortunately, most hosting providers don't do it yet,
Mhm.
but I know I'm totally thinking of switching to SiteGround just for that reason.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's a plugin or something in case your hosting provider doesn't let
I'm
you do
gonna
it yet?
I'm gonna say yes.
Mhm.
There's pretty much a plugin for everything, but there's definitely going to be a plugin out there that helps you with installing Let's Encrypt and making sure that you're set up properly. Most hosting providers, even though they don't have that button for you, if you reached out to support and asked, hey, I want to get my site on HTTP2 or HTTPS, they're going to probably have some resources for you that are specific to that host. So that's usually how you want to get started. Yes, in the back, purple
I
shirt.
use DreamHost and they have HTTPS.
Yes.
That's encrypted. They're yet not on the latest version of Apache.
Yeah.
So you have to use Cloudflare to get HTTP2.
Yeah, so some hosting providers are a little bit behind with HTTP2, even though you might be able to get an SSL certificate on there.
Or get yourself a VPS with NGIS.
Yeah, so your solution was getting Cloudflare going, which is kind of awesome how I didn't know that they can flip the switch on for HTTP2. That's great. Yes, Jack?
What hosting provider do you use?
Oh, the hosting provider that I use is DigitalOcean. It's bare bone. I'm talking SSH, login, and typing stuff on the command line, okay? So that's where I'm comfortable. But I could give, honestly, I really have been liking SiteGround for shared hosting. As far as premium hosting goes, I'm a big fan of WP Engine and Pantheon. But those are just my personal preferences, right? Whatever works best for you, and as long as it runs quickly, then that's all that matters, right? Yes?
Even for new sites?
For news sites? For news sites specifically? It depends on how much traffic you have. So we're a news site, right? But when we first started off, we only had one website. So we said, you know what, the cost of WordPress.com VIP is too much. So we did it ourselves manually on Amazon. And once we were able to scale to a point and to where we could pay enough money to get on WordPress.com VIP, then we moved over. So sometimes it can be frustrating to migrate from service to service, but sometimes when you're starting off from scratch, you know, if you don't know where it's going, a lot of times I just say try out SiteGround. You know, they're very there's a lot of Bluehost even. You know, like if you're only going to get one visitor every month, I mean, it's not a big deal. You know, but you figure it out along the way, and quite often I've switched too many times to be able to count on 10 fingers. So. So yeah, that's HTTPS and HTTP2. And the last thing is constantly monitor and test. Webpagetest.org is our main resource, right? But like I talked about, like I mentioned before, you can go to Google PageSpeed Insights, and that kind of gives you a nice little to-do list, right? But let me give you a good example of why Google PageSpeed Insights might not be your golden rule kind of thing. I can almost guarantee you that it will find a JavaScript file that's in the header, right? And a lot of WordPress plugins, when you have them installed, automatically put their JavaScript files in the header. And I know this. I know it seems like it could easily be moved to the footer, but they probably had some integration issues, and your site might be buggy if they put it in the footer. And that's probably on them for not setting the site up correctly, or for building a plugin that's perfect, you know. But that's how software is, right? It's not perfect. So whenever you go to PageSpeed Insights, just take it with a grain of salt. If you see those red X's, like, oh no, that's, you know, maybe that could be one of those things where you just flip the switch and wow, my site just got half a second faster. I mean, Amazon specifically, I think it was like, or Google, oh no, it was Amazon. Amazon, but I think it's like for every 0.1 second that their site was slowed down, they lost like several millions and millions of dollars a day or something. I don't know the number, but it's a lot of money, right? Just page load time. Pingdom, tools.pingdom.com essentially does the same thing that webpagetest.org does. The same thing I think GT Metrics does is very similar as well. Never bad to cross-reference. Bonus, you can write better code, and you can go to that URL. I can just do a Google search for WordPress.com VIP, what we look for, right? So writing better code also makes your sites faster, surprise, surprise. What not to do, and I think I have this, I have it in my notes, but I can pretty much tell you right now, don't just install stuff just because somebody told you to, or wow, look at this really cool feature, install. That goes for plugins, that goes for copy pasting, stuff from Stack Overflow, all those things, right? Just make sure that either you're testing along the way, or you're at least asking the question, do I really need this? Thanks, that's it. If we have any time, like this is my personal site, right? It's pretty basic. Here's my web page test. It's loading in 1 second, which is pretty cool. I have like the straight A's across the board. You can see here that because I'm loading Google Fonts, right? Here's Google Fonts. There's a whole lot of stuff going on just because I'm loading it from Google's server. I could be downloading that font and putting it on my server directly, and that would speed up that little thing. So I might be able to get this down to 0.6 seconds. We'll see what happens. Half a second. The blink of an eye is 0.3 seconds, by the way, just for reference. And let's try Jack's site out, because I did this beforehand. 2 seconds. But I will say this. And he got first byte time is pretty bad. I think that might have been an error on web page tests. So sometimes you might want to run it a few times. But notice the kind of the difference between his and mine. I mean, like this is my personal site, right? Very bare bones, nothing going on, right? So, so that allows me to have less resources, right? Most of the time, people are going to get a 1 second page load, right? So, but by having barely any resources loading, and having everything optimized SSLs, it's pretty much a guaranteed 1 second page load, right? But Jack has a bunch of cool stuff going on his site. So he got it down, pretty much got it down to 2 seconds, even with all this stuff going on. SSL enabled, pretty cool stuff. So yeah, and if anybody else wants to try something out so we can grill them, that's fine.
Can you try mine?
Yeah, let's do one.
It's edwardsturm.com. Edward, and then my last name is STURM, and as in Michael.com.
Okay, let's not do New York though. New York always tends to take forever. There's always a queue. Anybody else want to try one of their sites? Yeah? Okay, just shout it out.
HongKongHustle.com.
H?
Hong Kong Hustle, HUSTLE. Yeah. It's a big one.
Is that it?
No,
T.
HUST.
HUST?
STLE.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think it's in Japan.
So when it comes from New York City, it's slower?
So you can actually run tests from specific cities with web page tests. One of my favorite features, right? We'll jump. I heard one more.
Handsinc.org. That's going to
INC?
take forever.
Is it INC?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys ready for your first site? Got our test results. And look how I'm actually running 3 tests. There's also an option to say I want to run this 3 times, so that way if there's kind of a glitch with one of the tests, you know. But here, okay. Remind me of your name again.
Edward.
Edward. I think
Yeah.
we met one time before. But
Oh.
sorry about that. Okay, Edward. You got about 2 seconds, or no, sorry, 3 seconds, and then let's click into the waterfall. See what we can find. So I think the basic win that I see is caching static content.
Yeah.
That's just like turning on the browser caching like we were talking about before and saying like, if you download an image, keep it for a month, you know?
Would I do that through the CDN that I'm using?
Oh, got it.
No,
Yeah.
no, I'm asking, would I do that through my CDN? Or?
I do not know.
Okay.
So the question was, can I do that through my CDN? Not really sure. But here, you can see that, look at the awesome powers. Like, look how resource heavy this site is, and it's still loading in 3 seconds. I mean, this is actually pretty impressive. And you see this straight line? That's HTTP2.
Cool.
HTTP2, I mean, that's kind of awesome.
Can
And
we see what it looks like?
actually, now that I'm looking at it, yeah, we can look at it in a second. So this actually might be why the site seems to be taking a while to load. This right here could be adding some extra time. But notice how there's a couple resources that are on different URLs, different domains. So there needs to be domain negotiations, SSL, certificate negotiations. So again, the most important thing is your perceived speed. Let's see if the site is there. I'm gonna plug people's sites in this talk. This is running through my phone, so honestly, it might even be slower just because of my phone connection. So, cool, good stuff. It's actually a pretty good one. This one, to be honest, and that's the CDNs can do that. We got Hong Kong Hustle. You all do have a CDN. First byte time, that might be the testing server taking a while to load. But when you look at the waterfall, and give it a second to load.
So what is the F for?
The F just means, they give you a grade from A to F.
That's hard to read, though.
It's hard to read, okay.
Yeah, what does it say? First byte?
First byte time, and that is like a server specific thing. Like I'm not gonna, I don't want to try to explain it. But there's essentially if I'm on a shared hosting service and I'm sharing a server with a lot of other people, just connecting to the server and getting to my files and stuff, that initial connection, it can be, there's more hoops to go through. But let's take a, so that might, you can take off a half a second, you know, if you really want to, or maybe even a second. So, but let's point out the obvious here. There's an image that takes, it looks like 4 seconds to load. So that one, so finding that can be a big time saver. Past that, look, he has a bunch of JPEGs that are being loaded, but the good part is that they're running near the end. So his perceived page speed could be pretty quick. What's your name again?
Matt.
Matt?
N18, Nat.
Nat?
Yeah. So what was the perceived, I mean, what was the like page speed on that?
Ooh.
5 seconds.
5 seconds? No way. I guess because it's...
Well, your total, what do you got? So we'll see, notice how we went to the site and things kind of flashed around a little bit and then popped in really, really quickly, right? So your perceived page speed is actually much faster than most people, you know? And the reason why we have a lot of files going on here, I'm assuming your theme or the way you have things set up, you have some of these more advanced technologies, so you're loading more things. The main thing that I'm seeing is that you have a lot of JPEGs on this page. So if you're running on HTTPS, for example, all these files that are doing this over here, they could look like a straight line.
Yeah.
So that would be, seems like that would be a big plus for this site.
A straight line would mean they pop up at the same time? They
That means,
come at the same time.
that means instead of me grabbing, going into the cookie jar, going back over here, going back, I can grab all the cookies at once. You know? Okay, our last site, Hands Inc. And this is a much longer page load. But again, people get paranoid about that. And really what it comes down to is that perceived page load, right? On some of our sites, if you run the test, it can take a long time. But that's because we have ads loading, right? So here, if we scroll down, we can see some JPEG images right away that kind of stand out. And I'm thinking, based on what I'm seeing here, it's mostly images. So I think that's it. Like, I think we want to chat a little bit before we leave. Do we have any final questions?
I have a question. Very simple.
Yes.
For a full screen slider, what would be the ideal pixel size and the ideal mega?
I would say it depends. 1,000 pixels is my go-to, but
That would be the width and the height?
just the width. Yeah. So the height is just depends on the image, but we can talk after if you want.
We have 5 minutes.
Right. Yes. Question.
A quick question about HTTP2.
Yes.
If it's getting, instead of 4 requests at a time, or processing 4 requests at a time, it's processing 12 or 20, is it possible that in some user's browser with way too many tabs open and other kinds of applications that it might be so memory constrained that that browser and that user will be swapping files and slowing down their whole perception?
So the question is, with users doing so much on their computers and so many other things going on, could that interfere with the benefits of HTTP2?
Yeah. Are you going to see, if you were looking at a meter, would you see CPU and memory spike?
Oh, I see what you mean.
More than you would for a page under HTTP?
Well, there's a reason why we haven't moved to HTTP2 for so many years. I mean, this is kind of the ideal, what we've been shooting for a really long time, right? Or the web, yeah. So it's the ideal, but there were a lot of implementation issues. I mean, we've been on HTTP, I don't even want to know how long, I mean, 20, 30 years more than that maybe. And it's just been the standard, right? So I'm going to say that there's really smart people solving those kinds of issues, and all I know is that it's way faster. So and as far as those resources go, it depends.
The browser usually doesn't prioritize, it processes the active tabs, and if it doesn't have anything to process in the active tabs, then it starts processing the passive tabs. And the difference between HTTP and HTTP2 is that the messages that it passes through the protocol, they're smaller, you can break them into chunks. Because it breaks into chunks, they are parsing multiple requests at the same time.
Okay.
So
That's why it's just, it looks faster, it feels faster, but it's just more or less technically it's the same. It's actually a browser limitation, and every browser, like for example Chrome, can process only 5 requests, HTTP requests at a time. In HTTP2, it's just parallel processing of the messages.
So to repeat what was said for live stream, yeah, because HTTP2 is split up, I can't go into as much detail as what you just explained, but because it's split up into chunks, there's a lot more wiggle room for them to optimize things and do things in the background without you even realizing it. And so that comes down to the browser, and if the browser comes up with a better way, with an update to process these things separately in a more optimized way, your site will automatically get faster over time. So that's it for our talk. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you again.